Good evening, Husky fans. Thank you for tuning in to the 36th episode of Husky Dash. I'm your host, Nathan Mathisen, and today I'm going to be starting off the show with something I haven't talked about all year long, and that's Husky softball. The team has been playing great for the whole season. They won this past weekend in the regionals at home, beating Michigan twice Sunday to move on. They're now in the Super Regionals, and that'll start Friday with them going up against Oklahoma in a best of three series. So I'll touch on that. And then after that, I'll get back into my bread and butter, talking about Husky football, kind of giving a little preview for the upcoming season. And then finally, I'll close out the show talking about kind of a broad Pac 12 just for a little bit. But before getting into the football, let's talk a little Husky softball. And if you haven't been watching any Husky softball all year long, then you've really been missing out because this team is really good. And now they find themselves in the Super Regionals against Oklahoma, looking to prove themselves. For people who don't know much about the team, I'll give a rundown of them, kind of reviewing what they've been up to this season, who the key players on the team is, and just all that. So starting broadly, the team in the regular season went 41-11. It was their fourth straight season with 40 plus wins. So this team has been great the past few years, really. And this is just another great year for them. The Husky softball playing style, if I'd sum it up, they're more of a defensive team, I would say. They aren't a team that is going to really put up huge numbers every single game, but they're a team that likes it to be a low run affair, not many runs scored, and that's where they really strive, as they have an amazing pitcher in Gabby Plain and then an amazing shortstop in Sis Bates. At pitcher, Plain is a finalist for National Player of the Year on the season. She's in the top 3 right now for that. Sis Bates actually was in the top 10 for that award. So that just shows you how great of defensive players the Huskies have. As for Plain, her being in the top 3 for National Player of the Year isn't all that surprising with just the excellent year she's had. On the year, she has 32 wins, which is the most in college softball. She has 13 shutouts on the year, which is tied third most in the NCAA. And then she also is number 2 in strikeouts with 331 strikeouts on the year. Overall, Plain is simply the best softball pitcher in the NCAAs. And when you've got one of the best pitchers, what a better way to pair with than one of the best shortstops in softball in Sis Bates. The Oklahoma softball head coach, Patty Gasson, was asked about her, and she said, Sis is really flashy. She can spin around, throw somebody out. She's got a knack and a nose for the game like nobody I've seen, with the exception of somebody like Grace Lyons, who Lyons is the Oklahoma shortstop, who the coach called a journeyman, who might not be as flashy as Bates, but makes the plays. So getting back to Bates, when the ball is headed to her in a game, you expect something exciting to happen. You expect her to make a leaping catch on a high line drive. You expect her to make a hard ground ball, flip it to second, and then turn 2 with a double play happening there, or just a great throw to first to get the runner out. Bates then also is able to add some hitting to a Husky offense that at times can struggle. At times, when you get through the first 4 or 5 batters for the Huskies, they can really struggle towards the bottom of their lineup. And that's been an issue that they'll have to solve against Oklahoma if they want to come out on top. Bates, however, hasn't really had that much of an issue hitting. She's kind of been a great hitter since day one here at UW. On the year, she's batting an average of 385, 72 hits. And on her career, Bates has 317 hits, which is just 2 shy of Washington's all-time softball hit record. And with Bates having this great season, of course, comes a handful of awards. And that's what she's got. She was Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year, USA Softball Collegiate Player of the Year, top 10 finish, like I mentioned above. She was named to the All Pac-12 first team, NFCA All Region first team, Pac-12 All Defensive team. She was also drafted in the Athletes Unlimited, which I think they only had 12 players drafted. So that just shows how great she has been on the year. And she was also a senior class award finalist. Now, the issue for Husky softball hasn't been their defense for the most part throughout the year. It's that they don't have a lot of depth, and that's with hitting sometimes, as the bottom of the lineup has tended to struggle in certain games, in certain situations. And then also, or especially the depth at the pitching position. This past Sunday, the Huskies needed to beat Michigan twice in order to move on, as they'd already lost to Michigan once in the regionals. And the Huskies, they managed to do that. However, on Sunday, they only used one pitcher, and that was Gabby Plain, of course. In that span of 6 hours, Plain pitched over 200 pitches in total. And in total, in the NCAA regionals, the Huskies played in 5 games. Plain pitched in 4 of those games, pitching 27 innings in the 3 days, I think, that the regionals were over. So in 3 days, she pitched 27 innings. That's a lot of pitching, even with softball having that underhand motion where it's not as harshly on the shoulder. It doesn't wear you out as much. You still get tired. You still will feel the fatigue of that much pitching, I'd assume. So it's really going to be key for Plain to have these efficient innings so that she can lower her pitch count going up against Oklahoma. Because if Washington wants to beat Oklahoma, they'll have to beat them at home because it's in Norman. They'll have to do it twice in order to win the Super Regionals. And Oklahoma hasn't lost at home once all year, so it's going to be tough. Plain is going to need to pitch perfection. She's going to need to have her 2 best games or 3 best games, depending on how many times she pitches. I'd almost assume that Washington pitches her each game against Oklahoma because, I mean, the Huskies do have Pat Moore, who's a senior. She pitched in the after they lost to Michigan. She pitched the next game against, I believe it was Seattle U. Did a good job. She pitched a shutout. I think they won 8-0 in that game to then face Michigan again. But overall, Plain is the best pitcher on Washington. Everyone knows that. And in a game or in games this important, you just have to ride with your best players. I mean, that's what the Huskies did with Michigan. They rode with Plain. They pitched her a lot, but they needed her. They needed to win that game or they were going to go home. So going up against Oklahoma, whose offense is one of the best in softball history, likelihood, overall in their region, in their regional games. They played 3 of them. They won all 3. They set the softball regional record for most runs scored. It only took them 3 games. They put up 50 runs. On the year, they are 48-2. So Oklahoma can score. They can score quickly. I mean, in their first game in the regions, they won 19-0. In the 5 innings, it was a mercy. Then they also won one game 24-7 against a Wichita State team that was really good throughout the regular season. And some teams thought, or some people thought, that they could make some noise in the NCAA softball playoffs until, of course, they got matched up with Oklahoma in the regionals. So if Plain is on and if she's able to pitch to near perfection, I think the Huskies are able to pull off the upset. But that's what's going to be needed against Oklahoma, near perfection to perfection by Plain. And she's capable of that. But it's going to have to be back-to-back-to-back performances by Plain of that. And that's just difficult to ask anyone to do that without getting tired when they're pitching that much. Now, Oklahoma, I've talked about their offense. They are really just a well-rounded team. They have a solid defense as well. I mean, you have to if you're 48-2. But now the key for Washington winning is that great defense of theirs. and just keeping the game low scoring, keeping it manageable, keep them within reach. Because if the Huskies are within reach, they showed it against Michigan. They can have these bursts. I mean, they had that one inning where they put up, I think it was 6 or 7 runs in that one inning. It went from them being down 1-5 to them being up a couple runs and then eventually winning 10-1. So the Huskies can score. It's just a question of, can they hold Oklahoma to a low enough total to where they can reach that? Because the games Oklahoma lost, they lost to Georgia 6-7 in a game that went to 9 innings. And then again, they lost. Their only other time losing was to Oklahoma State, their rival, 4-6. So if the Huskies can keep Oklahoma in that 6-7 range of runs, then I think they've got a good shot at winning. I'm going to keep repeating this, sounding like a broken record here, just saying that Washington needs to keep Oklahoma low scoring. The Huskies have scored double digits 10 times this year. That's pretty good, right? In about 50 games, they've scored 10 plus runs 10 times. Oklahoma, in their 50 games, they did it 30 times. So over 50% of the time, Oklahoma put up double digit runs. They put up 30 at least once, I think, at 30 plus runs. That's just amazing. That's just shocking to see that in a softball game. I think it was 34. So that just shows Oklahoma's got this extreme offense. And it's just going to come down to defense, defense, defense for Washington. Now, Washington, I would say, is the best defensive team that Oklahoma has faced. So it's going to be a really interesting game, and I just can't wait to see these teams play this weekend. But now, moving on from softball and getting into football. The games don't start for another over 3 months, but that didn't stop Athlon Sports from releasing their All Pac-12 team list, or preseason All Pac-12 teams, and then also DraftKings from releasing their over/under win total for teams in college football. I guess I'll dive right into those, just starting with Athlon Sports' All Pac-12 teams. They released 4 teams. So I'll just start at the top with their first team and their first team offense, I guess I'll look at first. So the Huskies had 2 players make the first team offense, and I think most people could assume who those guys were. They're the leaders for this Husky offense, veteran voice. They're going to be huge in terms of their leadership and just showing these players how to play for the Huskies, really. That's as simple as you can put it. And that's K. Dotton and Jackson Kirkland. 2 of the elder statesmen, you could say, on Washington's team. 2 guys who are just going to play a huge role, both with their leadership, like I mentioned, but then also production role. Kirkland is really an anchor for this Husky offensive line at left tackle, protecting the blind side of Dylan Morris, who will likely be starting. And then Otten, of course, is going to be that safety blanket for the quarterback. And I don't really like saying safety blanket, I guess, for Otten, because he's more than that. Otten is just an all-around tight end. He's a guy who probably could have went into the NFL draft this past year and been a mid-high round pick, maybe in that 3rd round range, 2nd round range, depending on his numbers and all that. But Otten is a guy who he can block, he can run routes great, he can do everything you want your tight end to do. So he's not a safety blanket, he's just an all-around tight end. And he is definitely going to be a focal point for the offense. Last year in the 4 games, he led the team in receiving yards. I think it was receiving yards. It was either receiving yards or receptions, one or the other, I think it was. But that just shows how On is going to be the quarterback's number 1 look a lot of times, especially in the offense that I expect the Huskies to run, which is more of that run-heavy offense, which then relies on the play action. And a tight end in play action often can get forgotten and just be left wide open on just these little slip routes, 5 yards down the field, running drag routes, or just running straight up the middle between the 2 safeties. On can do and find the seam And if the quarterback can hit him, then it's a big game. So those two guys deserve those spots, I think, in the Athlon's first Pac-12 team list. But now getting on to the defensive side of the ball, Huskies have two players on their Athlon's first team defense list, and that's ZTF, who of course won't be playing this year due to his torn Achilles, I think it was. And then the second guy was Trent McDuffie, who just, what can you say, a great corner, really locked down, doesn't get targeted much because teams respect him. This is only his third year. As a freshman, he dominated really last year. In just those 4 games, you didn't see much from him because teams didn't target him. Teams respect him. So it's going to be really interesting to see how big of a step he's now taken in his third year. But now, looking at this first team defense that Athlon listed, one of the more shocking things was maybe who was missing, and that was Edefon Ulofoshio at linebacker. Instead, they have five linebackers listed. It might have only meant to be 4, but because of ZTF, kind of an honorable mention, they put him in. But looking at the 5 linebackers, or 4 linebackers, I guess, because ZTF, you got Drake Jackson from USC, Devin Lloyd, Utah, Avery Roberts, Oregon State, Nate Landman, Colorado. And I'm not arguing, all 4 of those guys are great college linebackers based on their performance last year from the stats I looked up with them and how they looked last year. They were great guys. So it's really hard to pick a guy for Edefon to get in over. And I guess that was the dilemma that Athlon had. And they ended up just leaving Edefon off. Spoiler alert, he is on their second team defense list. But one of these guys who, I think maybe Edefon could have been put over is Jackson, Drake Jackson. But the thing that I was a little confused about was it looked as if 3 of those guys in Devin Lloyd, Avery Robertson, Nate Landman were all inside linebackers, and just the one, and Drake Jackson was outside, and then ZTF, of course, also outside. So I don't know how they split up their linebacker in their inside versus outside. And if they had to have those outside, then yeah, Eddie probably would get left off. But if they could have put an inside over Drake Jackson, it might have had to been Eddie, because Drake Jackson's season didn't jump off the page to me last year. He had 20 total tackles, 2 sacks, 1 interception in 5 games. Those aren't great stats. Those aren't first team stats. Eddie's stats last year: 47 total tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries in just those 4 games he played. So I don't know how they exactly did this position breakdown with linebacker, inside, outside. But I think Eddie might have deserved that first team spot, but second team spot, he can just earn his way. He's the guy who's used to being kind of not looked at as one of the top tier guys, kind of left behind. So he'll just prove that he should have been up there, I guess, this year. Now, getting into second team offense for UW, they've got one. That's Luke Wattenberg on the starting center last year for the team. He's another one of these anchors for the offensive line. Another guy who has been here for years and years. He's been at UW since 2016. He started 36 games for them, including the last 3 full seasons. So he started all 4 games last year, and then the 2 seasons prior, he started all those games as well. 14 the one year and 13 the other. Overall, the Husky O-line is just a solid group. They've got lots of great players, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's 1 or 2 more of them who make this list for maybe in the 3rd or 4th team. Second team defense, as I mentioned previously, Eddie did make second team defense at linebacker. And third team, or nobody else on UW made the second team defense besides Eddie. And then I already talked about Eddie, so I'll just move on to second team specialist. Nobody on that. So third team offense, scrolling through the list here, nobody for UW. third team defense, we got one Husky player, and that's Tuli Latuli Gasanoa. He's a really interesting case in my opinion. He's someone who he played a little bit in 2019, and then in 2020 was really supposed to be his breakout year. He was supposed to really show himself at D tackle. Good size, 305, 310. And he disappointed, I guess you could say, just because he wasn't able to play. He was injured to start the year, missed the first 2 games fully. The third game, he kind of got in on the rotation, wasn't really fully in, limited snap count for sure. And then the fourth game against Stanford, he finally got the start, but he wasn't himself still. I mean, he didn't have the rep count that all these other guys had. So you can't really take last year too much for Tuli because he didn't play much. But he has the potential. And I think putting him at like the third team defense was a really good spot for him for Athlon Sports because he's a guy who hasn't yet shown it on the field, but he's shown it everywhere else through his practice, through just his athleticism that he has and his size that he has to be something great, to be a great interior defensive lineman for Washington. Looking at the fourth team offense from Athlon Sports, the Huskies have 3 guys actually on fourth team's offense that they listed. Those 3 guys are Sean McGrew, Trell Bynum, and Victor Kern. Like I said above, I wasn't going to be shocked if another Husky O-line made one of these lists. And Kern is a guy who hasn't played much. He last year started all the games, or all 4 of the games, and he was an honorable mention All Pac-12 player, just a solid player at the offensive line position, not someone who's really made too much noise, but that's why he's at fourth team. He's the guy who has the potential to really excel. Getting into the talk of Sean McGrew and Trell Bynum at fourth team, they're interesting. I kind of disagree with them being on this list at all, as in my opinion, they're both leaders in their position group at UW. However, both McGrew and Bynum aren't the best player at their position group at UW, in my opinion. Again, I would pick some of these younger guys at each position ahead of McGrew and ahead of Bynum. Both of them are the elders in the room, but both of them aren't the most talented that I would say. I mean, it's really tough for that as they're the guys who have played the most. They have the numbers, but guys like Cameron Davis, I think, has more talent than McGrew and could really show up this year and make a huge impact. A guy like Richard Noon as well, who he's basically been forgotten about by a lot of these non-UW mainstream media pieces. He had that great year in 2019, 11 touchdowns. 2020, he played 2 games. The first 2 games, he had 126 rushing yards, a couple touchdowns, I think it was. And then he got benched for an unknown reason and haven't really heard much from him about that since, really. He had a good spring practice from what I watched. Great spring game. He had that nice touchdown. And then wide receiver-wise, they got guys like Jalen McMillan, Roma Dunze, Jalen Polk. They got these guys who I think might have more talent than Bynum. Bynum is a solid receiver, I think. He's just, you know what he's going to get. You know what he can do. He's a reliable receiver, in my opinion. But these other guys have more potential, I feel, as they're younger. Bynum's a senior, like I said, the leader. But so I don't agree with that rating, but those were really the only ratings I didn't agree with. Getting into the fourth team defense, UW has 2 guys on that, Ryan Bowman, then Kyler Gordon. Bowman will be another one of these leaders who needs to step up, especially with ZTF down. At outside backer, Bowman's kind of been an every other year doing great, getting about 5 sacks every other year and then having that lull year. So let's see what he does this year. Let's see if he kind of takes the reins with ZTF out. Savell Smalls, I don't know. He's kind of struggled a bit, hasn't really seemed to kind of mesh with the college game as of now, hasn't yet evolved enough. So we'll see what he can do, but Bowman's definitely a guy who is just going to be a solid player, great leader, and able to make the right play. And Kyler Gordon is a guy who's going to need to step up as well with having to replace Keith Taylor at outside corner. But Gordon is a player I really love. He's got a high energy, and I love that out there at corner position. He's going to make big plays. He's going to gamble a bit, but he's going to reward them more often than not, I think. So I think he's a guy who could really be a surprise and really become a second team, first team type guy by the end of the year. And then fourth team specialist Peyton Henry made it as the kicker. So I guess that means the Husky has the fourth best kicker in the Pac-12, according to Athlon Sports. Now, getting into the DraftKings win posted for their over-under, they put the Husky over-under total at 9. So if that's a interesting number, I think it's actually a good number in my opinion. Leave a comment down below what you think. If you think it'll be over or under the 9 mark by DraftKings. But in my opinion, I think 9, it could be a pass on this one with just feeling they get 9 wins, but I'm feeling risky. I'm feeling like a gamble, and I would go over on the 9 number. And the biggest reason for that is because of the schedule the Huskies have, and it's a favorable schedule. They play Michigan week 2 away. That's going to be a tough game. But their 3 hardest games, Michigan, Oregon, and Arizona State, 2 of those are at home. The hardest conference games the Huskies have, Oregon and Arizona State, are both played in Washington on Montlake, where hopefully there'll be a crowd there where it'll actually feel like a football game, so they'll get the advantage. But that's definitely going to help them. And then personally, I think the Huskies match up well against Michigan. I think they're going to beat Michigan, in my opinion. Looking at it 3 months ahead, that's my early prediction for them to win against Michigan. But let's say the Huskies lose to Michigan. I find it hard to believe that the Huskies wouldn't be able to split the home series against, or the home games against Oregon and Arizona State. I think I couldn't find another game in their schedule where I think they wouldn't have a 65+% chance at winning. The schedule is favorable for the Huskies, and that leads to me picking the over on the 9 win total that DraftKings had. I feel that the Oregon game for Washington is going to be the biggest game of the year for them. That's probably going to decide the North champion and who goes on to for the Pac-12 championship, who battles that out. Maybe even decides the winner of that, Oregon or UW, 2 favorites probably going into it. But yeah, overall, I think 9 is a real good number for DraftKings to post as the over-under. Right now, I'm picking the over. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And now, it doesn't look like I'll have time for the whole third segment. But just a quick thing on it. Everyone knows the Pac-12 is, as you could say, looked down upon compared to the other conferences like the SEC for sure, Big Ten for sure, even Big 12 a bit. I mean, ACC, they got Clemson, but still, even with just Clemson, some teams would rather watch the ACC versus the Pac-12. So how can the Pac-12 change that stigma? Well, I think they're going in the right direction with hiring George Kliavkoff as the new commissioner. The number one thing that hurts the Pac-12 in my eyes is exposure. East Coast people don't care about a Pac-12 game going on at 10 o'clock their time that starts 10 o'clock their time. It starts 11 o'clock at night their time. They don't really care about that. So the Huskies need to get better schedule for their TV deals. And that's something that the commissioner said in his interview. He talked about the TV schedule and games schedule as something to work on. But something that I really loved that he said was, we're focused on the revenue sports and winning in football and men's basketball. It's great to win the softball championship. It's great to win the baseball championship, the rowing national championship. Those things are all great to win as a conference. But what does that really get you as a conference? Pride. That's what it gets you. It's not a revenue sport. You're not going to make huge money on those sports championships. Where do you make huge money that then helps the conference gain exposure? help them gain respect. You get that in football and basketball. Looking at the college football playoffs itself, in 2020, the Pac-12 received $66 million from football as just a base payout for the season. They then earned another $4 million for Oregon playing in the Fiesta Bowl. So in 2020, they earned $70 million as a conference split among the teams. The SEC, they got that base 66 plus $6 million for Alabama in the Rose Bowl, plus $4 million for Georgia in the Peach Bowl, and then plus $4 million for Florida in the Cotton Bowl. It was. Let's do some quick math there. That's $80 million compared to the Pac-12, $70 million. It pays to win. Hopefully, the Pac-12's on the right path, hiring this new commissioner. Hopefully, they can start winning. Hopefully, they can start gaining respect because it's been a while since they've gotten respect of other conferences. Now, that is all the time I have here today. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you learned a thing or two. I'm Nathan Mathisen. You can follow me on Twitter with the @ that you see on the screen right now. Now, I'm just a small part of the Dash Sports family. So if you'd like to meet the rest of the crew, check out our website, dashsports.tv. That's where you can find as many clips, quips, tips, rips, terrible jokes, and as many full episodes as you can stand, all in one place. All for free at dashsports.tv. Thank you for joining me today. Now, this might be my last episode until probably in August, as I'll be taking a bit of a break. I've got something going on in the summer. So if you don't see me for a while, fear not. I will be back before the football season starts to preview it all. I also have a host possibly, I think I've found. So that'll be great. So if I don't see you this summer, I look forward to seeing you in August. Now have a wonderful rest of your night. This is Husky Dash signing off. Thank you.